Music has played a crucial role among communities in the world since the beginning of time. This week, South Africa lost one of its icons. The world-acclaimed Johnny Clegg passed away after a battle with cancer. Now, during his career, he demonstrated that music could bring people of diverse social backgrounds together. Professor Patika Ntuli is a historian and cultural expert. He's in studio with me alongside SA's musical legend, Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in to chat to us.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to your viewers too.
Let's start with this before we move on to the larger question here. How did Johnny Clegg manage to immerse himself in Zulu culture and Maskandi music without falling prey to cultural appropriation? I think, Sipho, let's start with you.
Oh, I thought the question would be more appropriate to answer by
well, I think we'll ask both of you. We'll ask both of you.
Well, for me, Johnny represented something which was very unique for this country, in particular given the state at the time where white people were seen differently to black people. And I guess, as he rightly says in one of the interviews, that he was almost like a loose cannon. But for some reason, he assimilated his music into the African culture because he loved what he was doing. And the fact that all the time he was exposed to that music through what then people were considered garden boys or cleaners and so on. And at their break time, they would be playing this music. I suppose he got attracted to that music and developed an interest and, as I said, assimilated it into what he would create.
Professor?
Yeah, no, I think I agree. With Sipho, there's always this issue of appropriation. I'll give just an example in visual arts. The Dijaga collected, what was called township art, some of the most brilliant works. He got flack from black people who said we are stealing our works. The Afrikaner people where he came from said, instead of collecting our own works, we are collecting the work of the natives. Yeah. But his book, Images of Men, is one of those important books, that talk about it. What has happened with, the Johnny Clegg coming from KwaZulu Natal, committed himself that I am Zulu, I am African, and I am indeed a human being. Whatever anybody actually says, this is a path that I am going. It was not just only in his music, just in his being, in his anything. Somebody I would see here, always around near Hyde Park, you'll find him eating and tease him and leave him in there. He'll come with his food and tease you back. That's how easy he was.
He was real.
Real, absolutely. I just want to quote from an article that Saul Musker wrote for the Daily Maverick, an opinion piece. He said, what Clegg's life demonstrates instead is that creating bridges requires hard work and sacrifice, that there are no shortcuts to social cohesion. And I suppose that is exactly what he embodied. Sipho, what do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, as I said earlier on, and what the Prof had said, is that Johnny was genuine. He never broached any sympathies from any quarters whatsoever. He believed in what he was doing, and at the end of the day, he achieved, what many of us, found it difficult to interact with. The fact that he was able to draw from, in a way, he was instrumental in conscientizing white South Africans that there was nothing to fear about our own brethren, the African people. And through that music, he was, I feel more privileged that I could have seen that was he marginalized? Not at all. Those who loved his music embraced him greatly. And I could see when I was in some of his concerts with the audiences, some of the people were trying to emulate the dances. Unfortunately, they had not grown with the music as much as he did. And every time he would be dancing this, you'd see all these people standing up and trying to do the Zulu dances. In a way, it was a way of conscientizing people and saying there is more to the culture of our people than we think there is.
Professor, how is it that art and music in particular can bring people together in the way that it does and the way that Johnny Clegg did it?
Now, when you look at the history of South Africa and you look at our racial tensions and you look at what happened within the art in the world, many white artists worked with black artists in their own backyards. Even the security police, when they came, they will say, this is my private space here. Even as a white South African, let me do what I have to do. The relationship between, God rest his soul, David Golwane and Ainsley, Billy Ainsley.
Yes.
They were just like, brothers, wherever they were. They shared everything. You go to a variety of other places. I, as an artist, got supported by Ray Berman, who is in Swaziland today, who did things for me with what some of my people wouldn't want actually to do for me. There's something therefore about art, because art is about creativity. Creativity, also how creatively you use your feelings, how creatively you use your own thoughts. So through that kind of a creativity, then you can be in a position to bring about a real meaningful social cohesion in our country.
How do you think others, particularly white musicians and artists, can take inspiration from Johnny Clegg? How can they achieve what he did, Sipho?
Well, lately I've seen for some reason that there are quite a number of musicians now who are able to invite all different kinds of... and the fact that the spaces are open for all of us, where we find ourselves performing in the same festivals, is somewhat an encouragement. It somewhat encourages people to believe that there is a way that the arts can interact without any hindrance from authorities, which had been in the past. And I guess I am in a more privileged position that I've been able to interact with many of the white musicians in this country. I find myself performing with many of them, and also having known Johnny for so many years made it easier for me, and probably made it easier for others. Johnny was not encumbered by fear of the unknown as much as many of the white musicians. So they always find a way of saying, look, how do we get into this? And in one of the concerts that I performed, we did what you called the Operation Hunger concert. In one of the shows, I said, many people are going to be exposed to music from the other side that you had not been exposed to. And suddenly, white people realize, wow, there is music out there. There is Juluka out there. Juluka was on fire. There was Hotline out there. They were on fire. And there was Stimela out there. There was Soul Brothers. There was Ladysmith, Black Mambazo. So the music was imploding, and everybody was beginning to embrace even Americans. That's why we were able to get someone like Paul Simon to come to this country and realize the implosion of that music, to try and take it to the rest of the world. The rest is history, as a result of Johnny's actions.
Absolutely. Prof, how should white people approach collaborating with black musicians and immersing themselves in other cultures? I think
what they should actually do is to Google Johnny Clegg and learn what it is. Because what Johnny Clegg did, I think consciously, was to commit racial suicide. By committing that racial suicide, and that's what it is. That here we are human beings. Because when you look at cultures, white cultures normally sees people in terms of black and white. Black culture said, you are a human being and I am a human being, so that's really what it is. They're absolutely very welcoming. And let those people at least take a leaf from him. If at all he could do, what he did, learn the language, learn the rhythms, learn the culture.
As much as we learn theirs.
Yeah, as much as we learn theirs, and still be a white and a true African, more African than even some of the other people that we actually have and meet around, like my cousin who says, hey man, brother man, shit, things ain't gonna be like that, man. No, way back in Mississippi. So he was, but we have to draw a distinction here between being an African and being an Africanist. Because if you are an African, we are born and bred in Africa, you could be as American as anything, but You are an African because you were born here. But to be an Africanist is to be committed, to Africa, African culture, African progress, African this. Johnny Clegg was an Africanist in the just true sense of what the word really means.
What I said about Johnny's music, Johnny's music was a statement of intent. It's very important that people understood that what he did was intentional. That unless we go through this path, unless some of us as artists go through this path, many of our compatriots will never understand and learn.
Yeah. And I suppose part of what made him so great was, and I mean, we've been saying this all week, is that he said that he wasn't trying to preach politics. It just shone through everything that he did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because what Abini did, he was tuned to this situation. Even during the time when the whole mantra was, free Mandela, he is able to say, "Asimbonangu sobukwe, we asimbonangu biko." He never just took sides politically. He just spoke up the feelings of the people broadly.
Before it was fashionable.
Before it was fashionable.
Yeah. So Richard Pitthouse wrote that he was a dissident, a courageous man who confronted history and left an enduring mark on the world in which he found himself and an extraordinary, gifted and accomplished artist. Sipho, what do you think his legacy is? What are we going to remember him most for? I suppose it's a vast legacy. It's quite difficult to encompass in a few sentences, but...
I don't want to sound cliched here, but I think Johnny's work is there for everyone to see. And whoever may have a different view has to put a different view on what Johnny stood for. He was honest, he was sincere, and he believed in what he did. Like Prof had been saying, even before it was fashionable to sing about Nelson Mandela, when it was fearful, it was scary to talk about Robert Sobukwe and all those particularly that he was a white person, he went on to challenge the system. I guess his role must also be considered beyond just what his music stood for. It stood for equality and freedom for all Africans, African people across the color line.
And musically, his contribution?
His contribution was immense. It's invaluable. You cannot put a price on what Johnny did musically. I mean, the fact that, as I said earlier on, a lot of people were suddenly exposed to African music, it was through Johnny's work. I mean, I remember him saying to me, "I've just received a call from Paul Simon. He wants to use the word scuttlings." I said, "That's funny, Johnny. He just called you to use one word, scuttlings." And that's how much influence Johnny's music had been, even with some of the people internationally.
Absolutely. And Prof, culturally, his legacy?
Yeah, but I think what we have got to do is to also place Johnny in a very broader context. We had people like Joe Slovo. We had people like Bears, high in African culture, but the trumpet of conscience said, this is not right. This is not actually being human. We had the Ruth Fests. We got a number of things.
Yes.
But quoting Richard Pitthouse, I like what Richard Pitthouse says, because he himself represents exactly what Johnny is, but in the academic field, and I know I worked with him. He is a dissident, and a very good one at that.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. One more thing.
But one more thing, I'd like to pay tribute in a short poem I wrote for Johnny.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
I call your name, great heart, Ngitatazela, in this crude, crazy, beautiful world, under the African blue sky, just before the December African rain. As we say, Woza Friday, after the dance of human rainbows, before the crossing to watch the dance of the centuries, feeling fresh like Ijongozi in the heat, dust and dreams, where scatterings of Africa lead Umfazo Mdala, the old woman, to bring to the end the waiting for Impieza Ngobani, Ongatinta Mapubezi, to prepare for the moment moment when the system has fallen and the great heart bombs away nightmares of yesterday. Even as the shadow of man laughs at the sun, King of time, you sang for us in bleak days of death and despair. You gave us hope. You are right. Asimbonang umandelu sobukwe ubigo. Now Tamela, the son trek water. Yes, the sun drags water. Udela opuzayo. Happy are they that drink this voice of yours.
Professor, thank you so much. Those are very moving words. Yes, absolutely. Goosebumps. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I really thank you for coming in on a Sunday afternoon and for paying tribute to Johnny Clegg with us.
We salute him.
That was Professor Patika Ntuli and the legendary Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse.